Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the fourth part of our series on making this entire room animation here, and hopefully you are at a point where you're ready to add some lighting into your scene. This is basically what we're going to end up with at the end. We're going to do an environment light. We're going to add this really cool sort of like doorway light here. We are going to add a really neat flickering animation for our lantern. And if I turn the lantern off really quick here, and we have our little flame, and I press or I just sort of drag this here, you can see that I have a really cool little flame animation here so that that doesn't just look stagnant the whole time, okay? So those are the things that we're going to be doing in this tutorial. So without any more hesitation, let's go ahead and get started. First thing that we are going to do is we need to go up here and we need to actually use the scene lights and the scene world. So make sure that you go up here. And if you're on rendered view, and again, we're doing Eevee here, so just keep that in mind. And pretty much everything that we're doing here translates one for one, more so with cycles in a manner of speaking. And we're going to keep it in Eevee for now. And depending on what everybody asks for, I might do one where I just show the differences with cycles and what you can do in there. But primarily, we're just going to use Eevee for this. So let's first start off again by clicking this right here to use the scene world, because we don't want to just use the preset. You can use a preset, but we have some stuff that we actually want to use in the assets that we downloaded. And you can see we have our cool little lamp right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in our HDRI. So let's click here for the world properties. And then right here, you can see there's this little selection box here. And we're going to choose the environment texture. And everything's pink because we don't have a texture there. We're going to open, navigate to your assets folder. So we have the 2D and the 3D here. Go into the 2D folder where we have our HDRI. And you probably have a file on your computer where all these are just saved. Again, I'm just keeping these as a way of just showing you how to do proper file management when keeping everything just sort of like isolated and contained within one project file. So we're going to go in there and choose this theater. So we end up with this background like this. And we're not going to really see any of that when we put in our camera. We're not really going to see that stuff. So we don't really need to worry about that. And you can actually make that disappear if you go over to your render properties, go down to where it says film, and you can click on the transparent there. And now we don't see it. But what's very important is we want a general sort of like environment lighting in our scene, but we don't want it like this. It's a little bit too well lit right now to show off our candle or the lantern light here. You could use this as a well-lit scene if you'd like, and it works with whatever it is that you're making. But for me, I think it's a little bit more interesting if we take the strength here and let's put it down to like a 0.1. And you can see there that we have the reflection of our HDRI in the metals and stuff like that. So it's very helpful for just adding that little bit of reality to our scene when we have that. What we need to do now is we need to add a little bit more realism to the scene by adding some sort of like faked natural light from the outside. Now, you can make this happen as if it's, daytime or nighttime. It's kind of up to you on how you want to implement this, but there's a really cool technique that you can do here by adding a lamp that has a blue light to it. You can see that we have this orange light, this warm light coming from our lantern here. And we have a reddish light coming from the HDRI background. If I turn up the strength, you can see it's pretty warm. So let's just turn that back down to a 0.1. But we want to kind of make it look like there's maybe a door open or a window where there's some light coming in, either, it being nighttime or daytime. It doesn't really matter. There could be some blue light coming into the room to just add a little bit of kind of like if we think about this in terms of color theory, there's warm light and there's cool light, and the cool light can help offset a scene from looking too warm. And there's some other things that we can do with coloring the film afterwards and stuff like that. But let's go ahead and hit Shift C just to set our cursor to the center there. So let's go ahead and add that light in there. So we're going to add the area light like this. So Shift A, add the area light. And if you hit G and grab it like this and you move it over here like that, and you angle it by grabbing this little yellow ball, it, we need to add some in the light properties. We do need to add some power to this. You can do it like this right here. But the problem with that is that if we decide to move this later, like over here or something, you can see that the direction of that light is changing. And depending on how we want our scene to look, if you want it just looking like a door's open and you really don't care about the angle of this, you could just aim it at the back wall or something like that. But it's very good to sort of like get in the habit of controlling these things with different objects so that you can control it a little bit easier, especially the direction of lights. So what we want to do is we want to actually add an empty. So Shift A to add an empty, and we're going to call this light target. And if we select the light like this and then go here to the object constraint properties, we can add, by selecting this, track to target, use the little pipette here or eyedropper, and you can go to the light target up here in your node tree or the object properties tree up here, or you can select the object here within your viewer. So let's select that. And now basically wherever I set this, it's targeted directly at that empty that we created. So if I select the empty and I move it up here like this, or I move it way up here or move it down, and then I move this light closer or something like that, you can see that it's always directed at that target. So it makes it a lot easier when I'm changing where the light is actually located. So for this to look like it's coming more from like a cracked open door or something like that, we need to scale this on this axis here. And if we hit S and then X twice, you can see that it's scaling along the normals for that object because this is basically like an object itself, kind of like a flat plane. It's just specifically a lighting primitive. So if we go SZ twice, you can see it's going that way, which is not exactly what we want. So we want to go SY twice, and then that is the direction that we want it. Whoops, I went a little bit too high there. So let's try that again. Like that, just like that. And it might be a little bit too wide, so SX twice to make it a little bit skinnier. And let's change this to a blue light, something like that. And you can see if we look down at the table, whereas, maybe you thought, well, this doesn't really add anything to the lighting of the room. It's kind of like, it's still really dominant right here. If we turn this on and off, you can see there it's basically like the door, like all doors are closed. There's no light on the outside. There's like drapery closed everywhere. And we only have this single light here and the environment light. It might work for what you're doing, but I do think that this adds that little bit extra realism because it looks like someone just opened that door, cracked it open a bit or something, and is looking in, or that's coming from some kind of window, maybe somewhere off over in this direction. And you can, change this. You could put it over here if you like, if that works for your scene, or put it over here. But I like putting it somewhere like that right there. So when we do set our camera, we can see that blue light right there. To add a little bit more realism to our lighting, if we do hit play here, you can see that nothing moves and it's very, just static. And that's kind of normal. That is a, normal thing when you add these lights inside of here. It shouldn't do anything extra. But what would make this a little bit more interesting is if we actually made it to where this light in here changed throughout our animation. So what we're going to do is first, let's go ahead and organize this a little bit. So I'm going to make a new collection and I'm going to call this collection lights. And we're just going to take these and click and drag them in there, including our light target. And we're going to take the flame. And you know what? Let's put that in the lights as well, just for now. You don't have to, but I'm just going to put it in there for now since we're going to be doing something with that. And the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take the room and I'm going to take everything that's in the room, like just the room itself like this, and I'm going to hit M, new collection, and we're just going to call this room. And I'm actually going to take these vases or vases, however you like to say that, and I'm actually going to put those in there too. And if we turn that off, let's actually move this in there as well. And you know what? I'm going to put this in there as well. So that if we wanted to and you're having trouble loading up your scene, you can just look at this specific section right here. And let's go ahead and save that. And I have this saved as a version 3. You might be able to see that at the bottom, and that should work fine. I don't have the key presses on this time because you should be able to follow along just fine. The previous videos, you should have been able to follow along just fine as well. But I really want to utilize all of the space on here, so I will be saying most of the button presses that I do. If you do get lost or if you have any questions and you're wondering what I'm doing, make sure that you put a comment in the comment section below, and I will be more than happy to help you out with that. So what we want to do is we want to add some variance to our animation by making this sort of like glow a little bit differently throughout the animation. And what we can do is we can actually, if we take this like that, go here and change this to the graph editor. We don't really have anything right now, but if we have the point light selected, and we pull this up on the side, and you can do this in the in your shader editor too, but I'm just going to do this in here. I'm going to go to make sure that I'm on frame 1. Okay, so there's frame 1, and we're going to take the power here, and we're going to right click and insert keyframe. Now you can see over here there is a set of keys or points of information for what's called power right here. And on the graph editor, you can see that there is our setting. And don't do what I'm going to do right here. I'm just going to show you what you could do. You can grab this and you can actually move it to different frames. So you can see on the top area right here, you can see that I'm moving that on the frame count. And if I raise it up or move it down, you can see that it's changing the value of that glow. So how do we make it to where this is altering or, changing, fading in and out a little bit as what would happen with a lantern like this? Well, you could add a bunch of keyframes, or what you could do is that there are these nifty modifiers that we can add to this to make the change of the wattage or the change of the power rating here. We can make that animate over time without us having to do a whole lot and without us having to do a lot of like manual keys and stuff. So if we go to the modifiers right here and it says add modifier, we can go right here to noise. And if we look at this a little bit closely, you can see that there's all of these squiggles everywhere. And if you sort of like move this around, you can't really see the change too much here. But if you take the strength and you move this like this, and we start moving this around, you can see, hopefully you're able to see this up here, that it's flickering on and off, kind of like a bad light bulb or something like that, okay? And then if we take the scale here and we move it way out, and let me just zoom out a little bit so you can see this, you can see how much the scaling is happening there. And if we move that now, you could see it very clearly flickering on and off. So if we play this kind of like this, and we just take a look up here, it says frames per second. If you have a faster computer, this should be running at around 24 frames per second, which is what our render is going to be. You can see how that flickering works. And whether or not it's too much or too little or something like that, you can take the strength and we can reduce the strength, and the scaling we can expand it out a little bit more like that if we want it to be a little bit slower in the way that the sort of like flickering of that lamp is animating there. So I think this is maybe a little bit too low right here, so I'm going to take the strength down just a little bit more like this and press play. And I think just for, the terms of this project, this looks pretty good, just this little slight flickering like that right there. And with that done, what we can do is we can change this back to our timeline and move this down here, and you can see we have a keyframe right there. Another thing that we might want to do is if we hide the lantern and just look at our flame right here, if we just kind of look at this throughout the animation, you can see that it just stays stationary. And most of the time, I would say pretty much 100% of the time, you don't see a flame just sort of sitting like this, completely stationary, motionless, and doesn't do anything. So what we want to do is we actually want to add some animation to this. And we want to sort of do something that's going to animate the flame itself a little bit to give it a little bit more life. So what we can do is we can go into edit mode by hitting tab and Control R, and we're going to subdivide this a couple times so that we get squares. Do you see that? It's sort of as close to as even of squares as we can get. That's kind of what you want to do here. Okay, so this says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of like squares there. And what we want to do with this is we want to add a displacement. So if we go to the modifier here and click from here a displace like this, it just kind of moved over to the side. So, it is displacing it, but kind of in a weird way. What we want to do is we actually want to do a couple things here that sort of keep things a little bit stationary, but make the animation look like there's something actually happening with the flame itself. So you see this vertex group right here? What we're going to do is we're going to add some vertex information so that it really only grabs a certain area of the flame. We don't want to move too much of the bottom area, but we want to move the top area. So if we go back to edit mode, and hit 1 to select this. See where it says select mode is vertex right here. Let's select all of these upper vertices like this. And then if you go over here to the object data properties, and then you see the vertex groups, we can click the add button like this. Call this flame displacement and assign. Make sure that you click that assign. And then let's just make sure that it's assigned by hitting Alt-A to deselect everything, select, and you can see that it's all assigned. So let's go back to the displacement here and hit Tab to go back into the object mode, and then select our flame displacement. And you can see there's that going on right there. Beautiful. So, I mean, not exactly beautiful, but it is what we want. So the next thing that we want to do as well is we need to add some more subdivisions. So if we hit Control 2, it's going to subdivide that a little bit. And we might want to right click and shade smooth as well, because let's just show that shade flat. You can see that there's some lines right here. So right click, shade smooth, nice smoothness there. And then we want to put this actually above the displace like this. So the displace, it will subdivide, then it's going to displace, okay? And you can add 3 to this if you want, but really it's not going to do anything until we actually do something with this displacement. So we're going to click this button right here that says New. Then we're going to click this. That looks like 2 little pills, in my opinion. That's what it looks like. Click this, and it's going to take us to this texture properties panel right here. Then we're going to change this type to clouds. And you can see that it already did something really, really crazy right there. And we're going to change this size to be a lot larger. You can see already that it's taking more of the shape of what you would consider to be like a flame. So let's just keep making this a little bit bigger, maybe like that. And depth, you can increase the depth if you'd like. We can increase it a little bit. Maybe we want to not do so much. Maybe something like, I don't know, 2, something like that. That looks okay. And then what we need to do is go back over to our modifier properties, go back into the displacement, and change this strength a little bit, like this. Now, that's all well and good because it does a little bit of a change to the overall sort of dimensions here. But you'll notice that it's stationary. If we press play here, it's just stationary. And what we could do is we could animate some information in this area here. But what we want to actually do to make this a little bit easier for us to control, we're going to use an empty to actually control how this displacement is happening. And this is more of an advanced technique, and I understand if you don't really want to do this. But again, this is the process that I use when I'm creating real projects for paying clients. So if I add a new empty, and we're going to use a cube this time, and we're going to scale this down, and I'm going to just apply that scale with Control A, and I'm going to move it up here. And if we select our flame, and instead of the coordinates as local, let's change it to object, and then with the eyedropper here, let's select the empty. And now when we move this, you can see, if we zoom in a little bit, if we look at the flame, and if we scale this down, you can see that it's changing. And if we move this, let's say on Z, up and down, you can see that the way that the flame is moving, it is different. And if we move it this way, it also changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some adjustments here. And I'm going to click on this texture here, and we're going to look at the clouds, and let's change this sizing maybe a little bit. Maybe to a 1 or something like that. And then go back to the displacement. And I just want to turn this up a bit so we can see this a little bit easier. And we can also shift the mid-level as well. We can move this to the left to make it 0, so it's going like that, way over there. or we can have it go like this, or we can have it set at a 0.5, which sort of sets it right in the middle somewhere. And let's see if we can actually take this subdivision and move it here. That actually smooths it out a little bit. You could do one before and after. You could do that, but let's just leave it there. And there we go, like that. So that looks kind of neat. Let's see if we scale this down. Maybe like that, and then control. There we go. That's a little bit better. So you see it's a little bit more wavy if I, and it will keep the scaling. So if I hit Control A and I apply the scale, you can see that I went back to that. I'm going to Control Z. Sometimes it's okay to keep the scale on these things if it works with how you're doing your objects like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the part that's the most extreme like this, and I'm actually going to change the displacement so it's not as strong because it will get a little bit crazy. So I'm going to turn the lantern back on so we can take a look at that. And what we don't want is for it to go all nuts around this wick thing right here. And what we might need to do actually is take the flame, and what we might need to do is remove this from the actual vertex group. So let's go to the vertex group and click remove a couple times just to make sure. And let's go back to looking at this in the rendered view. And this should stay out in front of that wick a little bit better. And hopefully you can see that the flame is moving just a little bit back and forward like that. So that's kind of what we wanted to do. It's not too much, but it's just enough to actually show that there is something happening with that flame to where it's not always just completely stationary. So what we'll do here is I'm going to, on frame 1, I'm going to set this empty down at the bottom somewhere over here. You can see that right there. And we can call this, instead of empty, let's call this flame displacement object or something like that. And if we hit N to open up these transform properties up here, right click to insert the keyframe. Really, it's just Z, but it's fine if we just keep it as that. And then let's go to frame 250, grab it on Z, move it up to about, I don't know, up here, right click, insert keyframe, and let's just take a look at this. So you can see it's moving. And there is something that I want to tell you about. If you watch the empty, you'll see it's going and it sort of like ramps up. If we start on frame 1, you'll see it's sort of slower and then it'll ramp up towards the middle. And then at the end, it will sort of slowly get to that ending spot. Now, we really don't want that. Those are what are called Bezier animations. And if I open up, you don't need to do this. I just want to show you what I'm talking about. If I open up the graph editor and we take a look at this object, do you see these Bezier handles here? You see that one? And you see that one? This is the animation curve. So it's slow to begin and it's slow to get to its resolution. And really what we need is just a linear path. So if we select, if we go over here and we turn off Y and X, because those aren't actually animated, they are keyed, but they're not animated. But if we just look at the Z and we select this one and this one here, we can right click and then we can change the interpolation to linear, and that will go from this point to this point straight, and we don't have to worry about it ramping up and then it sort of like having an odd animation. So if I press play now, it will straight from one point to the other move, and then we have more of a fluid animation for our flame there. Now, you could do this easily without having to deal with the graph editor. I just wanted to show you what that looked like. If I close this up like this, if you select the animation keys down here and you right click, you can do the interpolation or the easing mode as well down here if you want to do these other automatic easings or a linear or constant or whatever it is. You can play around with these if you'd like, but linear is going to get you from point A to point B in a straight path without it changing at all. Let's turn back on the lantern. And we're also going to turn on the room. And that's going to pretty much get us where we need to be as far as the general lighting is concerned. And we have the little bit of a flicker in the lantern. We also have a little bit of an animation for our flame here. And if we are to add our camera, which we can do here, add camera, and hit 0 to take a look through it, hit N, go to view, and we want to select this right here, camera to view, just for now. We can move this around and place this kind of in a good position like that, and just take a look at how this is going to look. This, if you have cycles on, will actually do something, but since it's Eevee, it does the full frame. So if we have this centered right here, and we were to turn off the overlays and hit N to turn the lock camera to view off and just sort of zoom in and watch this a couple times, we can see that there's that little bit of flickering that's happening with our lantern, and it's looking pretty good. So that's going to be it for this tutorial. We did a lot of interesting lighting stuff. I showed you how to do those modifiers with your animations and to set a little bit of a cool glow going on. And we also set this really cool sort of doorway light here and the environment light that goes around the room. So hopefully that helps you out with understanding how that lighting can be set up pretty easily. Of course, you can make adjustments as you see fit for whatever scene you're making, or if you're making this exact one, just making a little bit different and unique for yourself. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Please, if you enjoyed this, throw me a like and a comment down below if you are struggling or if you like the content or just to say hi. I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much to all of my patrons and for those who are members of the channel. You guys are awesome, and it helps me out greatly that I get that support. Stay tuned, and I will see you all next time on DJ Tutorials.